Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of the Virtual Ninja Show. My name is Heike and I will be your host. Today we are going to talk about QR codes. We had a lot of questions from you guys that we should do a session about it. And I have Brandon with me to discuss this topic. Welcome back to the show, Brandon.
Thank you, Heike, very much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you again. And for those that might not have seen the episode we did together about our attack simulation training, please introduce yourself.
My name is Brandon Koeller, and I'm a principal product manager. And since last time we talked, I had owned the attack simulation training product, and I've since changed roles within Microsoft Defender for Office 365 to work on our core prevention product. So same team, just a little bit of a different role.
Yeah, and that's, I think, why I have you on the show today. So I think let's first cover a little bit, what are we talking about? Like, why is this suddenly such a topic? I remember QR codes, they exist for a long time, but for some reason, it is now a topic to discuss.
Yeah, a really good question. Everyone has that same question. MDO saw the first QR code phishing attempt a couple of years ago in the wild. We saw it at the time. Just wasn't that common, wasn't that popular. We didn't wasn't really turning into breaches for anybody. COVID really changed the landscape for almost everybody. Cell phone manufacturers like baked in QR code reading into all the cameras. So literally everybody just has a QR code reader wherever they are. And everyone sort of got very accustomed with going out to restaurants or going to get a COVID flu shot or something like that to just pull out your phone, get connected to the web. And it was just a very easy thing. So public knowledge about what is that weird black box with the like pixelated things in it, what does that mean? Everybody knows what it does now and how to sort of interact with it. You can go to sporting events and they'll put up a QR code to register for some giveaway or whatever. So people's understanding of what it is that they're looking at and how it can translate into something of value for them has changed enormously. And attackers have figured that out. And so as people have started incorporating QR codes in their business processes and stuff like that, people understand how they can be used. Attackers are just starting to operationalize these QR code phishing attacks, which really are still functionally just credential harvesting attacks. It's just a URL, right? The QR code itself doesn't contain anything other than a link to a resource that's on the web. They have operationalized it into all of their toolkits. And something like 6 weeks ago, we saw an enormous shift in attackers starting to use this QR code phishing in very, very, very high volumes. And so, about 6 weeks ago, we saw a lot of customers saying, "Hey, we're seeing a lot more of this," and MDO is pivoted all of our resourcing to address the attack.
So, Brandon, I mean, it's a picture, right? And this picture is. Then there is a URL. Like, how does that even, do you know how that even works? Like, how is the URL coming out of that picture?
Yeah. Is it okay if I show you some examples?
Yes, please.
These are all harvested from the wild. They've been made safe. You'll notice that there's a big blurry box over here. Attackers take this square black box with these three little anchor points at each corner. That raster image that is sort of rendered there is defined by an external standard, and essentially it translates into a string of text. And the most common use of that text is to translate it into a URL, a web address, or whatever. What attackers are doing is they contextualize that QR code in another lure that, like in this particular case, this is branded as a Microsoft SharePoint message about an employee benefits plan for the current year. And, this looks like an HR team being extremely considerate and saying, "Hey, we know you want to check this stuff out. You can look at it on your phone while you're on the go. Just scan this QR code." Attackers sort of understand that people will see this, and it feels normal. Like, this feels very much like the sort of thing that you would see. It's just that it's got this new innovation of a QR code that sits on top of it. Another example that we've seen in the wild, Microsoft Authenticator app, people have become more and more aware of two-factor authentication. And this seems like, oh, I'm just, like maybe the connection between my Authenticator app and my account got broken. So I just need to scan it and sort of reestablish the connection in here. So this is, again, very nefarious because your expectation here is that you're going to log in. But what you really end up logging into is the attacker's infrastructure where you give them your username and password, which is very insidious.
I always say check the URLs when you go to a website, regardless what it is. Like I even check when I'm reading the news, like whatever. I try really always to look at what is the URL that I land when I open a link.
One of the things that makes this such a challenging attack, both for end users and for security operators and security administrators, is it takes the normal breach vector off of your computer, wherever that happens to be, and onto your mobile device, where you only have a mouse and a whatever that's the size of your finger, and so it's when you click on a link, it opens it up in the browser. Oftentimes, you can only see like the first 20 characters or something like that. I'll show you an example here of how attackers sort of leverage that. It's very difficult to scan for that. Maybe you're looking for an HTTPS versus an HTTP thing at the top. It will show that, but more difficult to detect when you're on your mobile device.
So, but Brendan, I was actually, when I was preparing for our show here, looking at QR code scanners for my laptop. And I need to say I was hesitant to install any of them because when I clicked on it, it's like, oh, it wants access to the camera. Of course, it needs access to the camera. But like, is there also something that happens on the devices already? Like, is there software and do we need to protect the laptop there in the same way as a mobile device?
It is amazing to me how easy QR code scanning is on a mobile phone and how difficult it is on a PC. There's almost no software that I was able to find that makes it super easy to just look at a QR code on your PC and be like, translate this and open it up. There's all sorts of weird apps, like it is a very different experience. It's just baked into your phone by default. There's no extra config that's added. So attackers know this, and they're trying to change their breach vector from your PC, which is likely very well managed, has a lot of logging, a lot of like extra protections and things like that, and get it on your phone, which probably isn't as well managed, right? Like most of the time, people use their phone for their personal stuff and their work stuff. And unless your organization is like invested a ton in splitting those two profiles apart from each other, it becomes just a lower bar of entry for attackers to do that. So just a couple more examples here. This is always interesting. We see attackers layer techniques on top of each other. In this particular case, they have an update your email account lure here. Just click this or scan this, and you sort of takes you to in theory the email restoration piece. But that QR code in the wild was actually an animated GIF that starts out saying, hey, Microsoft security is going to scan, and whatever, and then it flips to the QR code. So if we're scanning for a QR code in Mailflow and we hit upon that image, it doesn't show up as a QR code because it's not necessarily animating the GIF or whatever. Attackers sort of know that. So get very creative in how you sort of avoid these things.
So there is two things, right? There is one, preventing even someone from clicking on it by identifying basically that it is a QR code and there is a bad URL behind it. Mm-hmm. And the other way is if someone clicked on it and then probably something like Smart Screen and other protections come in that will then hopefully alarm and say, sorry, that's a bad reputation and you should not go there. Is that
That's exactly right. There is this is the first time we're seeing this URL. Like, what are we going to do? Like, how do we detect that it's a QR code and, figure all that out? It's sort of the leftmost prevention. But there's always a story that comes after that first time. Like once you break the seal on a particular URL and a customer reports it or Microsoft detects it, it filtrates through the rest of the ecosystem as a bad URL. And it protects users even after the fact. So in a lot of cases, MDO, if we figure out that a URL is bad, we actually have a recovery process that will reach into your mailbox and pluck that message out and junk it or put it in quarantine if we think that it's connected to a bad URL after the fact.
But now it's not a URL that is sitting in an email or behind a text. It's basically a URL that is in a picture.
That's right. And, there's interesting challenges to that. MDO has a protection service called Safe Links. And every URL that comes through that's Safe Links protected gets wrapped, right? And so it's, basically we'll have it routes through our service. We register that URL and we go and we detonate it and look at it and, whatever. And there's a lot of things that attackers do to make that URL look like it's okay, but then change it out behind the scenes, right? Like they'll deliver a QR code and it'll sit in your mailbox for, let's say, a day, right? And, we'll scan it and be like, this looks okay. We can, tell that the URL is fine. And then at 24 or 48 hours, they'll change the target website that sits at the backside of that URL after the fact and turn it into a malicious website that harvests credentials and things like that.
And that is where Zap comes in.
So Zap is about that, yes. And we also have this time of click protection, where if let's in the case that there's just a regular URL and we catch it, we monitor, we detonate, it looks fine, and then it's sort of somebody reports it as bad after the fact, we go and we look at it again. We're like, oh yeah, now it's bad. If that Safe Links URL wrap is still there, then we'll now mark that. And when the user clicks that link, it'll go through our service. We'll say, this now is bad. And we'll tell the user, don't go here. This is no bueno. QR codes defeat that because we have not wrapped these QR codes with our Safe Links protection. Long term, that'll be the goal, to take the URL that's embedded in that QR code, wrap it with our Safe Links, and essentially rewrite that QR code that with our decorated wrap inside of it, so that you'll be protected at time of click. Just last example here about what we see in the wild. This is a multi-layered thing. Upper left, this was the original message that showed up. Very, standard issue, like confidentiality notice, like you see these all the time on, mails that are like sent to CELA or lawyers and stuff like that. There was actually an HTML attachment to this message. Email can just be an HTML content, but you can also attach HTML to it. So what they'd done is they sent this thing that looked totally normal and included an attachment that was HTML that included this QR code. And then that QR code was actually embedded link. So if you look here, chart.apis.google.com, like that's like a regular service, but buried inside of that is a redirecting URL that takes you to a malicious location. This like 3clouds. Or cloudsoft.com or whatever. That's the actual lure. So it's this like rabbit trail of hidden and bifurcated and difficult handles to go and figure out from a protection standpoint. So attackers have really picked up on this QR code pattern and are being very creative with how they're getting it landed in users' inboxes.
Brendan, we are making it harder for them. And of course, they are trying new things and they are also trying to work around our preventions and protections. Is there, besides, of course, check the URL, we talked about it, use MFA, and then, of course, you come from the attack training simulation. Is there QR code content already included?
So you can make one yourself today. Absolutely. And there's a blog post that we ship. We can attach to the bottom of this, written by one of our great experts to go and create one. We're actually working on one that's sort of baked in out of the box. I expect that'll be in production, in the coming weeks. The way that you should think about this is that MDO, if you're using that as your email filtering product, is doing a lot to protect and prevent those QR code phishing attacks from sort of landing in your inbox. That protection is multi-layered. It's not just based on, is there a QR code in there, right? We look at sending infrastructure. We look at heuristic signals that live inside the message. We look at, like time of day, who's being targeted, whether it's the first time that you're being contacted. There's all sorts of signals that go into this. And we're constantly chasing attackers down. As they shift tactics, we shift our protection and our filtering to also accommodate that. There's a ton of like machine learning algorithms that are looking for these signals and trying to integrate them in new and interesting ways. We know that attackers will always sort of evolve their techniques. Like the minute that you have like a QR code detection, this is definitely a QR code in there, an attacker will just slice it and merge it together in a HTML table. So it looks like it's one QR code, but it's actually 4 partial QR codes, right? Like there's all sorts of techniques that make it a harder thing. But MDO has a bunch of layers of protection, hundreds really, that sort of live in the filtering ecosystem that are designed to evolve alongside of attackers. So it's, you always have some piece of that. That being said, there is a ton of stuff that any customer organization can do right now to protect yourself against this. As you say, end user education is probably the single most important and impactful thing that you can do. If your users understand that they shouldn't be willy-nilly scanning QR codes everywhere they go, then that's a good first step. We tell organizations to think deeply about whether they have any legitimate business use cases around QR codes inside of their organizations. And if they don't, they should consider just telling the users, look, whenever you get a QR code, if you do see a QR code in your inbox, just don't scan it. Like there's often a URL that's sort of down in another place in the message that you can go and look at. Just don't pick up your phone and scan it. Look for some other way to sort of follow the link. Legitimate messages always make that possible.
It's so convenient, Brendan. I like it. I mean, I'm a big fan of QR codes, honestly. Like, I go to a parking lot and I need to pay for parking. I click on that camera icon, get my ticket.
There are in the conversations that I've had with customers in the last a couple of months, I've seen dozens of interesting, legitimate business use cases. And context is always important here, right? If you're sitting at your desk at work and you get a message saying that HR is wants to like give you a bonus or something like that, as an end user, you should be thinking like, okay, this is not I'm trying to order a beer at a restaurant. This is this sounds too good to be true. It probably means that it is too good to be true. So just bring your kind of skeptic hat when you're thinking about it. Organizations should be thinking in a nuanced way. We've got a handful of legitimate business use cases, right? Like I know Teams, for example, when you go to install Teams for the first time, it will send you an email with a QR code to install Teams mobile app on your phone. That's a perfectly legitimate use case. If you're trying to roll Teams out, you really do need users to do that because typing in, Teams blah, 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 that's incredibly challenging. So yes, like be nuanced about these are legitimate use cases and these are ones that are not, and train your users on how to do that. My sense is that teaching your users to be skeptical of what amounts to unsecured communications is a high value, not just in the case of QR codes, right? Like QR codes is just the kind of soup du jour, if you will. Next month, it'll be something else, right? It'll be some other kind of new, innovative thing. And your users can take a healthy skepticism of that into other things.
And it's not just educating the users. I think it's also for the organizations really manage the devices. Like, I mean, ours are managed. Otherwise, I can't access corporate data, which is already, protected. Of course, I could, with my personal phone, get phished and do something bad because I scan a QR code, but it's currently like it's a company concern. And they should really enable protection for their phones, have them managed up to date with always the latest, greatest, whatever products they're using on the phones.
That's right. An organization that's taking these threats seriously because they understand that these are incredibly impactful to their business will have a full security lifecycle. You'll hear the phrase assume breach get thrown around a lot. Just investing in protections, while important, should not be the only piece of your strategy. Post-breach strategies around detection, around robust response and things like that will dramatically reduce the impact of any one of these. Fundamentally, QR code phishing is a credential harvest attack. That's it. It's like, in theory, like you can put a piece of malware on the other end of it as well, like to download a piece of malware or something onto the device. But fundamentally, it's the same attack pattern that we see in all the other things. They're trying to steal your username and password, or they're trying to get malware installed on your local machine. If you have a robust ecosystem of protections deployed, and you have the ability to detect a weird login from a geography that the user has never logged in from before, and require MFA or 2FA with conditional access or something like that. If you have just 2FA protections on that account, it's incredibly powerful for preventing use of that credential in the first place. Being able to quickly reset that user's password and sort of regain control of that account, maybe even with automation, those are super powerful in reducing the impact of a credential loss like this.
So, Brandon, this is right now something people talk about. There was something else before. There will be something else coming up as we talk, right? So attackers are also trying new ways. But it is not just a Defender for Office 365 thing, right? So we need the different layers or the different domains protected. And maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's you've got it exactly right. QR code phishing is just a credential harvest, and or in little tiny brackets, potentially a malware attack, just like what we've been seeing in the wild for many, 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 many years. If your organization has invested in robust protections, multi-layered, and good post-breach capabilities to empower your SecOps teams to detect and respond and automate things as much as possible, there's nothing different here. It really is just the same stuff with a little bit of a twist, a little bit of special sauce, if you will. But if you've equipped yourself with all those sorts of things, you'll be able to handle this in exactly the way that you've always been able to handle it. Yeah, that's it. It's the same stuff with a little bit of a fun twist for the fall, and away you go.
Yeah, if our customers, many of them that are watching our show, of course, they have the Defender suite. So you have everything to protect your identities, the endpoint, cloud apps, Office or collaboration tools, all of this, and you're in good hands. So with that, Brandon, thank you so much for being my expert again on the show. I hope I will invite you again for a future episode. And everyone out there, thanks and stay safe.